The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2. I mean, spoilers, of course. I said last week that whilst I played the hell out of the original game, I never played Part 2 of The Last of Us because I just never found the time, but I made a huge effort to avoid all spoilers of it with the idea I would one day play it, or in this case, watch the TV show, meaning I went in almost completely blind to this episode. Okay, someone left an irritating comment on my last video mentioning the fact Joel dies at some point, so I knew he would die, but even right up until the end of this video, I did not expect it now. This soon? Episode 2? No, Joel's gonna survive this. Jesse's gonna burst in or something, it's gonna be fine. I was in shock. I still am. It was only like half an hour ago I finished watching this. And we're going to talk about that, obviously. We're going to talk about how intense this whole episode went. Pulled out all the stops. We get a battle, a literal battle with the infected. But first, there's something bigger and more meaningful I want to touch on. So looking back now, I think my episode 1 video was mostly spot on. I talked about how well they developed a really intricate community feel here, with all sorts of different little dynamics and conflicts and gossip going on between people, but crucially, conflicts people were working to solve. Joel and Maria's difference of opinion was one they managed amicably. Gail was able, despite all her resentments, to talk to Joel and to start to work things out. Ellie as a whole is caught up in so much conflict, this whirlwind lost in her own self-destructive impulses, masquerading as control and strength. Her recklessness is annoying Kate and Jesse and the council in ways that obviously wouldn't be tolerated in a disciplined military, but here it feels more like your average family drama. A niece Tommy can't help being half charmed by, the best friend of Jesse's, sometimes girlfriend, sometimes ex. There's a problem here with Ellie that needs resolving, but they're also not going to go to war with someone that feels like family when there are these close bonds at the same time, especially when it's Joel really who should be working to resolve this. Even the Seth example was great. This could be a huge point of tension, but no, he apologises and I think is fairly sincere. He tries, somewhat motivated by Maria, to resolve it amicably because they are all still a community with nowhere else to go. They have no choice but to try and get along. Maria is suddenly like a mother or a school teacher here to Ellie, who you can feel standing there looking at Ellie like, he's met you halfway now, please do the same, Ellie, please. And Ellie does, but with the absolute bare minimum. It sort of counts as resolution, and Maria is too tired to push it any further. What's the point I'm making? It's that we're seeing time and time again how things can be resolved, how people can come together. Not necessarily forgive, not necessarily fix everything, but definitely start to begin the process of moving forwards. We're seeing lots of examples of that, except the one that really counts. Oof, there's the tragedy. You know, in an ideal world, we'd all get the time we need to be as angry as we need. Ellie was so angry in episode 1 and would get the space to voice that anger, to be heard, to then start to heal and forgive and move forwards, but it isn't always the ideal. Sometimes people die before you get the space to say everything you need to say, and to ask them as well. Why? I even felt that with Abby this episode. Not once does she ask Joel why. She's too angry to even want to dare understand him, and maybe she knows why, I'm not actually sure. There's suspiciously been no mention of Ellie from them. Surely she knows to some extent, but she'll never get to ask now. She's had revenge, but has she found an answer, an understanding that can help her wrap her head around the tragedy? I don't know. This is tragic for Abby too, I think. Do we expect her to look fulfilled at the end of this? What the hell does Abby do now?
You don't actually have a plan, do you?
No, I do. The plan is to convince her to...
Get a subscription to World Anvil!
Because if we don't, the only people getting killed out here are us.
Oh, you better believe it's World Anvil. They are sponsoring this video, they are offering you 51% off, and they are an online tool for building worlds, you may have guessed. But also creating characters, designing and managing campaigns for all sorts of different games. My best friend uses it for D&D, but there's lots of other games. You can use it for planning your stories, writing your stories, working on all sorts of creative projects. For me, it is my novel. I need need it all like this, otherwise I am far too chaotic. We're moving flat soon and I literally have 6 cardboard boxes full of random sheets of A4 paper I've written old ideas on. Pre-World Anviled me was a nightmare. So with something like this, not only can I keep everything organised, keep it all in one place, be able to easily edit things, but I can create timelines, I can create hyperlinks branching off specific characters or articles or a billion other things that just make it so much easier to find stuff. Planning things can be hard, especially when there's so much to do, but having all of these tools to help visualize it, to help split everything down into specific points, articles one at a time, it helps immensely. I'm not going to show you because it's a secret, but I've created different bio pages for all of the characters in my world, even the minor ones, which house they live in, what their job is, who they're friends with, who they hate, what different beliefs they have or opinions about events that go on in a book or whatever. So, World Anvil is great. I hope you can hear my passion, and if you desire, if you crave. If you call to the heavens for a 51% discount, then use the code TREE, or click the link in the description, or the pinned comment, or if you just want to try out the free version, then go for that. You know, there's no time limit on it. Test it out for as long as you want. World Anvil. To be clear, it would seem Ellie and Joel did start to work things out right before this happened. Crucially, start to work, begin the process. Ellie suggests as much to Jesse, but I also like this shot of the guitar. The gift from Joel that had been thrown to the side, dusty and unattended, until he took it back last episode. Now Ellie has it again, with pride of place on a stand. It's clear an important conversation did happen between them, probably here, which I think we will see next episode. That's my guess. I think it's a good decision not to show us their beginning of a resolution yet, not to see them beginning to heal their differences until after we know it's too late. That's going to be a heartbreaking scene now. And all of this is going to age Ellie awfully. Think about this. The whole point of Season 1 and Game 1 was, well, Joel first learning to appreciate Ellie, but then fighting to preserve her, whatever you want to call it, innate goodness, her childish side, her innocence. The thing that wore away from Joel years ago, that Ellie's presence is starting to revive in him. The thing that represents why it's worth saving humanity in the first place. Ellie went through so much in Season 1, but because she had Joel, all of that, or at least a lot of it, was preserved. She reached the relative safety of Jackson and was finally able to really be a kid. A wishful, naive, overly confident, insecure, sweet, annoying, bratty teen, rebelling and getting in spats, and people trying to work with that the way you would a family member. But you know, a lot of you commented on my last video, oh, there's no way a 19-year-old would behave like that in a zombie apocalypse. She should be older and more mature. But one, can we not keep simplifying and glorifying trauma into this horrible and yet apparently magical thing that grows a person into a well-adjusted adult, where like they're allowed to be a bit sad or cold sometimes, but otherwise they're expected to be perfectly healthy? No, trauma can work in a lot of different ways, and it's very, very rarely straightforward. And two, Ellie has rarely ever had much space to be a kid. The one time she really tried was a tragedy of how two kids are supposed to be on opposed sides of a deadly conflict, and how quickly that all gets ripped away. I would imagine some of Ellie's emotional development has been hindered by never getting the space to be a kid. And when that happens to people, they don't just skip that step of emotional development like it was never needed. Generally, they are left with a slightly childish side to them somewhere underneath. That's, if they're lucky, they do later get the safety to express, so that they can then start to belatedly get that kind of emotional development. Going back and exploring a bit of their childish side while they're much older, you'd be surprised how many hardened adolescents or adults who grew up in gangs or very hostile environments can just melt away into seeming like children. Sometimes even toddlers, if you give them the space, because that's a thing they've needed. Ellie is a bit like a sponge to this, I think, so coming into Jackson and on the one hand trying to act like this hardened figure who is wishfully attempting to emulate the flawed idea of Curtis and Viper, while on the other hand behaving like a child. And that stuff is obviously causing problems that Joel should be better able to help her with, better reinforce her boundaries, better give her space to explore their dynamics between the two of them rather than it spilling out into how she behaves with Jesse and Kat and all these other things. However, the idea of Ellie getting to behave like a teenager in itself, that is a good thing. It is something to nurture and to help her grow out of into a well-adjusted adult. Ellie needs that. Joel could have done that. Joel was maybe just starting to help her with that, and now he's dead. Not only is this another example of Ellie losing everyone she's ever been close to, but I think this is now her last shot at childhood being torn away from her. As a result, will she ever get that emotional development she needed? I think that's going to be a very tragic shift in Ellie's demeanour this season now, from finding the space to start exploring her childhood into all of it just shutting down for good. And you know, a lot of people keep saying Bella Ramsey looks too young for the part, but I think a youthful look adds to the tragedy of what she's losing here. In my opinion, this episode is a masterclass in emotional tragedy. It's shocking, it's painful to see Joel die, but it's also such a natural development in terms of where the story should go. I hate it, I love it, I don't quite know how she'll recover, but let's discuss the structure itself, okay? I just want to say this now. I remember hearing the game The Last of Us Part 2 really divided fan opinion at the time, and I didn't really know why because I was trying to avoid learning, but I'm not surprised it divided people now seeing this. It's a very, very bold thing to do if it also happens this early into the story in the game, and, you know, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound snobby, but I think some people just don't want to be challenged by stories, or at least not too much. They want something that does feel new and unexpected, but also quite familiar at the same time. There's nothing wrong with that in itself. It is one reason I think tropes become so popular and why cinema is increasingly very predictable, and where, whilst there are still great films out there being released, ones I would love to talk about more, too few people watch them for it to really do great in the YouTube algorithm for a channel as small as mine. So I think we really have to praise this. I think back to all the videos I made on the House of the Dragon series, where there was a lot of positive things I did discuss in that show, and yet there was also this deflating, disappointing structure where the show keeps going, get ready for the big stuff, it's happening soon, get ready, oh, we're ramping up to it, it's coming, and then the season ends. The Last of Us, you know, laid seeds to ramp things up in episode 1. The conflict with Ellie and Joel, these smarter infected now, the weeds through the pipeline, Abby on the way. Even just the fact there is all of this subtextual stuff going on within Ellie. You know, oh, get ready, things are hotting up. And then it immediately goes to the max, the HBO Max. In episode 2, a guy hits these weeds, it sets off the network, the infected come, and Abby bumps into Joel, and Tommy almost dies. Which, by the way, I think is my favourite shot this episode. Tommy and Maria crying together at the end. I love it because it's not the being the badass trope where he shrugs it off. No, Tommy cries having survived the bloater. Of course he does. How fast all of this dials up is really, really surprising. And in a way, part of me would have wanted an extra episode. That would have felt the more familiar thing. I would have loved more space to know what Joel and Dina talked about on their scouting mission. I would have loved more space to take all of what's been subtextually going on within Ellie in episode 1 and bringing it much more to the surface. All of this setup with Eugene is so intriguing. The way Jesse's talking about it, he had to die, what are you gonna do? But the camera lingers on Ellie like she knows something we don't. I would imagine at a guess this is now Ellie wondering if Joel killed Eugene because he was a Firefly, because he knew something about what Joel did and just gave the excuse that Eugene got infected. Or else, if he was infected, he might have had the time to properly say goodbye to his wife before turning, but Joel shot him early to stop him speaking. I think Ellie is wondering that, and it's something then she would have wanted to talk to Joel about, to ask him. That could have made for great conflict, as well as the general fact that Joel shot someone who was infected early. Like, yeah, that's the general thing they do, but how would that look should you later find out Ellie is immune? That Joel knows immunity is possible, and yet he ended Eugene prematurely? That too could be great conflict, and I was thinking, damn, all of this stuff is going to build into something juicy that will come back to bite Joel, but then he dies before any of it ever surfaces. And on the one hand, that is a shame. It's less what you expect of story, it denies us something that would have been gripping, but on the other hand, that's again the whole point I was making with this video, that you don't always get the time you need. That's the tragedy here, that no one will ever get to ask him about this stuff now. People don't just die with all their loose ends tied up neatly, things are left unresolved and unspoken, and that makes the grief so much harder. I think it's also in that context that the fact Joel speaks so little at the end is doubly powerful. Let's talk about the moment itself. I was too in shock to tear up at this. I finished this episode and just felt numb, but I think Caitlin Denver gives a great performance. Rage, grief, desperation, but also, interestingly, I don't think the most menacing. I never felt that intimidated by Abby. You know, maybe that's just my delusion that I was hoping Joel was going to survive this, but I said last episode she wasn't established enough for me to feel much threat from her. I mean, she obviously does kill Joel. There's also this vulnerability to her, and not incompetence at all, but slipping down the hill, her panic at moments, her eagerness, and I think her struggle to control the scene with her presence here. This doesn't feel like a seasoned killing machine or anything, just a kid lost in her own rage. Just as I was sort of saying I predicted about Ellie, someone frozen in that since the age of 19. On the one hand, I would have preferred her more menacing, and like I'm not talking about like physically bulking her up. I've heard this is a thing from the game that people are complaining about, that apparently Abby is a lot physically bigger there. I'm talking more about her presence really. On the one hand, that could be very effective. On the other, I respect what they're trying to do here. Again and again, so much of this show reminds us of the children underneath all of this horror. How tragic it is that they were ever put into these situations. It feels pretty clear to me this season is going to be a revenge quest now, but a revenge quest not between your classic trope of seasoned professionals. Instead, one between two girls who are still mostly children underneath, carrying a weight well beyond their years and trying to act like seasoned professionals. I think just that idea is heartbreaking to me. I don't know if that idea will make for as engaging a drama, but it's a really fresh, interesting idea that I'm so excited to explore. I gave episode 1 an 8 out of 10. I think this one is almost 10 out of 10, maybe 9. I'd like to have stayed with Ellie a beat longer here for this to really hit, and I think there were a couple of moments where I'm suspending a little bit of disbelief, but that hardly matters much. I think I'm particularly critical in my grading of this show because I expect so much from it. You know, I think this is really top tier television. Rewatching season 1 again, I'm much more impressed by it than I thought I was before. This is a show that's not just fresh and exciting and heartbreaking in its story, but it's also really seeking to explore something new. And that's what grips me, I think, far more than even how just generally thrilling and gripping all of the action was here. I mean, I don't know how similar this is to the original game, but season 1 was certainly trying something new to explore something new compared to the game, and if season 2 is doing the same, then I think whether you prefer it or not, you have to appreciate that. So let me know what you think. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe even support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Ben Ree, Joshua C. Follier, and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.